as someone in media relations at the moment, do you sense like a real sort of earthquake happening just related to how we connect with our politicians, how we demand they connect with us, how social media has replaced cable news in a lot of ways, just that everything really, this really does feel like to me, 4 years from now, the election is going to be extremely different than this, which will probably be good for a lot
Right,
of reasons. But this really
right.
does seem to be an election taking place in two worlds, the traditional mainstream route and the online world. And they're just like clashing, and that's what's creating such craziness.
Yeah, and I actually think there are really three elections right now. There are those two. There's sort of cable world TV, drama of the day, repeated all day long on cable TV. Then there's kind of the online conversation that real people are having with each other or ranting about with each other.
Right.
And then there's actually the campaign that's out there in the States on the ground, organizing, where there is real organizing, particularly on the Democratic side, in the coffee shops and in the town halls and community centers and things like that, where there really is kind of old fashioned shoe leather vote targeting going on. And it's rare that those three, campaigns have come together in moments this cycle. I think that um, what's the so I think this notion of the citizen voice is stronger than it's ever been,
Mm-hmm.
and the pushback on conventional wisdom. I find that reporters are most outraged and freaked out of all the things that happen in this campaign. The thing that reporters hate the most is this Donald Trump, like, don't believe the media, the polls are rigged, this is all crazy, the media is biased. Like, it's sort of the attack on the media, the undermining of the media as the credible source of information about the campaign that has people the most crazy. And in some respects, their reaction to it only reinforces it, because they spend a lot of time then um, killing the message, which ends up appearing like they're killing the messenger. So a good example of that was what I thought was like a ridiculous, overwrought reaction to Donald Trump saying he wasn't going to accept the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I just thought, this is stupid. Of course he's going to accept the outcome of the election. He's he's foaming at the mouth. He's doing what he does, and but yet for 3 days it was the headline. What do you mean? If we say that it's over, it's over. No, how can somebody say it's not over when we say it's over? Um,
It's
and
interesting. It's interesting because that line I actually thought was, and I led into the top of the show with this. I actually thought there was some legitimate, scary stuff with that because it's a dog whistle to his people if he loses to say that it wasn't us, but the system. It's one thing to say the media is messed up, but it's another thing to say that the actual voting is rigged. So I actually did think that it had some cachet. I'm not giving it legitimacy. I'm just saying it had some like worth to push back on.
yeah, I understand, but I think of all things, I think they're going to conflate whether or not the system is rigged against them versus whether people really believe that voting machines have been hacked.
Right. Those
Um,
are two separate things.
yeah, and I don't think that people will get to voting machines have been hacked. I, call me skeptical on that point.
Yeah.
Um, but the system is rigged. The media is biased. Regular people don't get a fair shake. Your voice isn't represented. I mean, that's Bernie Sanders too, right? That's not just Donald Trump.
Well, that's the funny thing. They both were the outsiders. But okay, so as someone that does this, that is a Democrat in media relations and cable news and the whole thing, is it fair to say that there are more Democrats generally in media than there are Republicans or conservatives? Most of the people are liberal. That's fair to say, right?
Hmm.
Give me a media relations answer. Come on.
Um, well, I'm gonna split this up. I think what we have seen traditionally in the Republican Party as their national candidates, and ever since kind of the right wing took over Republicans, um, what you end up having is sort of a real split on social issues. And I think that there's no question that my experience in the media world that there are more sort of socially liberal media folks than there are socially conservative media folks. And so whenever candidates put emphasis there, I think that has created bias. I think the Trump issue, though, isn't really about Democrats versus conservatives. I think it's just that people are offended at how much he lies. I think people in the media are just appalled at just the kind of bad fact machine robot like person that he is, and tries to encourage other people to be, and I think people are just incensed by it, and in the media, and so they're constantly pushing back on him, particularly in the last 6 or 8 weeks when it got more serious. And so, but I don't think that they'd be treating Mitt Romney this way, or I don't think they'd be treating Marco Rubio this way. I think this is unique to Donald Trump.
Yeah, but really, I mean, with Romney, there was the binders of women and the 47%. Like, you don't think at this point they pretty much were saying Romney was anti-woman at this point? So isn't it just that's sort of what the Republican is going to get? Like, I think a lot of people are looking back and going, man, maybe we should have been a little nicer to Mitt because look at this.
Yeah, I'm not sure the binders of women was as much a media thing as an effective echo that the Obama campaign made happen. But so most of my reporter friends honestly don't vote.
Mm-hmm.
And
is that out of principle or laziness?
Out of principle.
Okay.
That they find that important. So I actually don't. But do I experience them as generally socially more progressive? And yes, but also, I do think there's this path of socially progressive, fiscally conservative. If there were a candidate down that middle path, you'd find a lot of media more apt to be there.
Yeah, well, I think that's where most of the country is. I think they're fiscally conservative if they really understood economics, and I think they're, for the most part, but obviously not the fringes, are socially liberal. But I'm curious, as someone that's been in this for a long time, and you're in the DC crowd and the media crowd and all that stuff.
I'm in the crowd.
You're in the crowd. You're very
so in the crowd. I am the crowd.
You're very popular amongst the popular people that are in DC and all that stuff. What do you think about the sort of level of friendliness in general between the media and the politicians? I mean, we could look at any cable network and the amount of people that are considered analysts that either work on campaigns or have worked on campaigns or who are actively working on super PACs. I don't even need to name the people, so I won't put you on the spot, but there's plenty of people that then leave there to go work for the DNC or work for, like, it's just this big orgy, and people, I think, are really legitimately sick of that. So as someone that has a little insight into that, how should the average person view that?
I think, and I've been at MSNBC and CNBC and CNN, so those my experience. But I think that the network, in some respects, looks at people like us as cheap talent, and then there's a lot of free talent because there are a lot of people who come on with expertise for free. And I
thank God you said that, because every time I've gone on HLN, they never pay me, and I thought maybe it was just me. But
yeah, no, it's not an anti-Rubin thing. I do think that producers and bookers try and look for people to come on these shows that bring something to the table, and I don't think that it's a disqualifier that one of the things that they also bring to the table is having been in the room, and that sometimes they're still in the room, the room where it happens. And so I think that that's something that viewers have historically been interested in from an analyst point of view. But I do think that it has the potential to turn into kind of a feeling of coziness, that there is a there's a room where things happen for people who are invited into the room. And if you're not invited into the room, you get screwed. And I think um, that's why, like I think at CNN, we have anchors like, frankly, Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, people who don't see themselves as particularly political,
Hmm.
and will ask people questions like regular people talk. Um, and so I think that's really important. I think that we can be on TV interpreting what's happening in the election for people who don't live it day in and day out. Interpret, what does that mean if a poll says this in one state and a poll in another state? How do you reconcile that? And how might a campaign make a decision about where to disperse resources? So people like me can bring that kind of expertise to the table, and then people like me can argue on behalf of a candidate and trash another one, right? So we're going to bring those two things. Um, but I'm not going to pretend to know details about um, the job search of a laid off factory worker in Ohio. I have empathy for it. I want to see good public policy about it, but I'm going to depend on CNN to go to Ohio and find ways for those people to talk for themselves and to find like real representatives for it.
Yeah. Do you think part of the problem is just a human reaction? Like once you're invited to those parties, I always think the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I used to be friends with someone in a public person, I don't have to mention him, who would rail against it. He thought it was the worst thing ever. You see, the media's in bed with the administration and they hated it and hated it. And then last year got invited to it. Now he's all about it. So like, so that there's some element of it's almost like the powers that be can kind of invite you in, and everybody wants to go to the cool part. They call it the nerd prom, which sounds so douchey to me, but like they know, you got into the party once, you're around these people, you enjoyed the good food and the cocktails, like you're going to ease up a little bit. It's just natural human reaction. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's a fair estimation? I know not for everybody, but I think for a certain amount of the reporters that are around it, it's like you want to be in the club.
Look, I'll just take Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton as an example. I don't think either one of these have had reporters this year ease up on either one of them. I think part of it is timing. Hillary had a really rough year and a half this last 6 or 8 weeks. People have said, all right, we've really dissected her and gone off on the emails and gone off on the Benghazi and done like everything. And now they're still going after her on WikiLeaks and other things. But Donald Trump had by a lot of media accounts, a good skate there for a while. And so now he's getting, his rectal exam. And I think in some respects, it's a timing issue that people are paying attention now in a way that they didn't pay attention before. But I do not think either one of these candidates feel like the press has been cozy with them. And I think if you look at House and Senate candidates or local candidates that are subjected to media now, there's been less emphasis in the media on some of those other races because the presidential election is such a, car accident that you can't, take your eyes off of it.
Yeah.
But so I think maybe on some of those races, there's less focus than there needs to be, but I don't see this as kind of a clear sale for either of these folks.